This is part 2 of a 2-part podcast.
Put Paul's brain on your plot. Do you have a hunk of land but don't know where to start? Do you have a world-changing permaculture idea and you need some feedback? Do you feel like the guy in overalls may inexplicably hold the keys to all your wildest permaculture and homesteading dreams? Well, you're probably wrong. But if you want to give it a go anyway, you can hire Paul for a consultation. He will be all yours for a whole entire hour. Schedule your Paulversation today at permies.com/consult. permies.com/consult.
So, all right, let's move on with our list of things that we need to talk about. First of all, I want to say something about nonprofit stuff. I want to point out that real quick, and I've kind of touched on this a little bit in previous podcasts, but I'm going to bring up a different point that I don't think I've brought up in previous podcasts. Most nonprofits would disappear if people were not paid.
Which is comical, but also true. But nonprofit workers barely get paid to begin with. But man, if they didn't even get a little bit, it would be hard to justify and sustain working it. There are few people that will do a significant amount of work for no pay.
And, I mean, there are exceptions, and I love to use the example of Free Cycles in Missoula. The director is, I think, not even getting minimum wage to be the director. And but there's a lot of volunteers that work there and get zero pay. I mean, probably 20 volunteers. So the whole thing functions day after day based entirely on true volunteers. Whereas, I don't know, I imagine just in Missoula there's got to be 100 different nonprofits. And I think those 100 nonprofits would cease to exist if they didn't have some way of paying everybody. And it's the way that they get to pay it. So it's basically that so much of the work that they do is fundraising in order to be able to pay everybody. But the point of pointing this out is permies.com is run entirely by volunteers. There's nothing in the managing of the site that is done by anybody that is paid. And so, and then on top of that, I pay the bills, and it's and the server bill is just the beginning of it all. But there is this whole thing about if you go to a website and you don't pay for it, then you are the product. And I'm kind of thinking I don't know if that's the case at Permies, but I suppose the whole mission of we're trying to infect brains could be part of it. So anyway, I just kind of feel like people spending their time with our stuff is going to be more effective. I also kind of feel like a lot of those nonprofits, in a way, are maybe. I mean, there's so much I don't understand about them. They're a money drain, because it's okay, look, we got $1 million in, and now it's gone, and we didn't change anything. We just kind of kept existing, and we paid all of our people. We got so many people here that need to be paid. So I don't know. I guess part of it is okay, put money into the BEL. The BEL is still active in its fundraising mode. It just never. We did a fundraiser thing through the dailyish email, but it never got much funded. A bunch of people put some money in, but it's still going. All right. Let's see, the next item I have on here is, I wish there was a huge nonprofit full of well-paid peeps who are pushing permies. And so this has been brought up 100 times. And mostly, every time it's hey, Paul, you should set up a nonprofit and then do all the work that nonprofits do. And then people can then put money into the nonprofit for all the reasons people put money is in the nonprofits, and then those funds then turn around and feed into and it's like in this case, perhaps that money could go into the BEL or other things. And it's kind of like, and then what I do is every time somebody suggests that, I say, if you could do that, that would be great. And they're like, well, I wasn't thinking of doing it. I was thinking you would do it. And it's like, yeah, like I got nothing else I'm doing right now. And so I feel like, yeah, that would be terrific to have, to set up and whatnot. And then, yeah, people, who knows, for all the stuff that we do with permies, wow, that would be amazing if there was like, I don't know, 20 people working for some nonprofit and they all got paid $100,000 a year, and big gobs of money came in, and then somehow they shot money over to permies.com for stuff. That would be cool. On that note, I do want to say a couple of quick notes. We've had record permies traffic. So for December, we had 2.8 million unique users. And then yesterday, we had 191,000 all in one day, which is a record for us. Somebody said something about ChatGPT is recommending us for some kind of business, for gardening business, something. And I want to say we do like to support budding businesses on permies, including links and things like that. And we also, however, block a lot of spam. I think we have a very rich set of spam fighting tools, probably more than most sites. So we do great in that respect. All right. Next subject. And this is the big subject. We were talking about this yesterday, and I said, "Ooh, we got to say that into a podcast." And so it goes a bit like this. In fact, the thing that I wrote down was Drop City. So there's a book called Drop City. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this book in a podcast. I don't think I have. I think that when I talked about Drop City, it was long before I started recording podcasts.
I feel like I've heard you mention it before, but I can't differentiate if it was on a podcast or at a previous table conversation. Yeah.
Okay, so now you're suffering from the problem I suffer from. I talk about this stuff all the time, and it's like, did I say it in a podcast?
Hey, now's a good time. Let's just do it again.
Okay, so this book, Drop City, it has two parts. The first part is where this guy has land, and he loves the idea of building community. So a whole bunch of people come out there and are living there, and they're getting stoned a lot, and they're doing all kinds of drugs. And
do you recall what the time frame, like when 19 somethings this was in?
I'm going to just guess it was the year 2000.
Oh, okay.
So like when the book takes place, and maybe when the book came out,
okay.
Stuff like that. Just a guess.
Yeah.
Just a guess. I mean, it's been probably 20 years since I read the book. So, but anyway, all right. So, and they were open to anybody and everybody, and a lot of people came out, and so there was a couple of people that were a bit industrious and kind of helped to carry the whole community, but most of the people that were there were like, no, I'm too busy getting stoned and doing that, and consuming. My life of consuming is taking up most of my time. I don't have time to be industrious.
All right, so I Googled it, and it's a 2003 novel, but it's set in various years from the early 1960s to the 70s.
Okay, all right, I'll roll with it. But all right, so the thing is that a lot of people, like maybe 40 people, were living on this land. So there's just a guy, and he just said, "Sure, you guys can, next thing you know, the land is absolutely infested with people, and the government is getting involved, and the government is saying, thou shalt not, and people are pooping in the woods, so like they don't have like a way to manage poops." And so But on top of that, there's like some issues where there's physical violence. Like there's this, like in the story, there's this one guy who beats the ever living shit out of a woman at least once a month, and it's kind of like the community is like, yeah, he's like that, and that's like, I don't know, that. It's hard to read. It's hard, but it's like this is part of their community where they don't exactly have standards, and nobody wants to like kick this guy out. Not because, I mean, they all want him to go away, but the guy's like not gonna, because he's hostile, and no one wants to get into that. And the guy that owns the place doesn't want to get into it. He wants things to be nice. But it finally gets to the point where everything has gotten so bad, like the amount of poop in the woods is overwhelming now, and the hostility and the violence and all kinds of other things are so out of control. But the guy that owns the property inherited another property up in Alaska, and I think that the story starts in Colorado. But so they get a giant school bus, and they all race up to Alaska. And by race, I mean it takes them like the better part of a month to get up there. And along the way, a lot of the lesser people peel away. They don't make the trip because it's too much of a trip. It's too much for them, and they get distracted by shiny objects on the way and stuff like that. And then, of course, once they get to Alaska, then everything is different. It's a harsher environment. It's farther from the city. You're going to have to be a little bit more build and constructive, and so it kind of thins the herd quite a lot. All right. The thing is that I wanted to say, we started talking about some communities that have existed, and they have a very open policy. Everybody's welcome. Everybody can come, and it's like it can work for a while and be delightful for a while, and then eventually some people are kind of like, I don't feel like contributing anymore because of whatever reasons, and I commanded that person to be obedient to me, and they wouldn't be obedient. So now I'm angry, and until I get my way, I'm going to withdraw my contribution to the community while continuing to consume resources and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like you got to have some kind of standards, and so we were talking about a community where it was beautiful and delightful and young, and people were coming and they were contributing, and everything was lovely and dreamy and good. And of course they were getting stoned a lot and things, and that's fine, that's great, more power to them. Our standards here are a little different, but I do believe that in time it'll become something like, and I could be wrong, it could become something like Drop City. And then there will be a couple of people that are industrious, and then for every industrious person, there's probably going to be like, I don't know, a dozen or more people that are not, but they're kind of all telling the industrious person what to do. And eventually the industrious person's kind of like, fuck all y'all, I'm out of here. And I think that industrious person might like to come here, where there might be a lot of industrious people, and a lot of contributors, and a lot of people that are going to, so then it's like a lot. It won't be perfect, of course, but it won't be as extreme as that was. And then when that community, when the industrious people leave, they might start to go downhill a bit. Now, okay, this is, I'm not saying that the community that you told me about is going to have this happen, and I hope that they are just lovely all the time, forever, and it's all great. And I am wrong. I hope I'm so wrong. All I can say is I've visited a lot of communities, and I've heard a lot of stories, and most communities kind of start off exactly what you described, which just sounds dreamy, and then it takes a year or two. Sometimes it's only a few months, but it generally is a year or two, and it all goes up. Now, I've written about stuff like this in the Thorns book, and I believe you've read the Thorns book.
Yeah.
And so.
I think I, like you, I'm very interested in community and the dynamics within it, and I feel like I'm always trying to observe and have a keen eye on what works well, what doesn't. I loved the podcast you made with Diana Leaf Christian. I think, it was interesting. I'm just always interested to see how that works. And I mentioned my friend's community that's, just over 2 years old, because, it was, I guess what I first mentioned about it was, my friend, and his partner purchased this property, and they had, longer term dreams of building community, and I think they were very surprised that community arrived at their property much sooner than they ever anticipated, and they're really grateful for it. And I think the premise for why they've been successful is that they've said yes, as that's kind of been their mantra, I guess, in purchasing the property. They agree to saying yes more, to opportunities. And so I think I mention it because I'm really curious to see how their model will work. Unlike Paul has a lot of well-known standards that he, reinforces, versus my friend is, more open, more willing to, give each individual autonomy. And so in many ways, it's so opposite of how Paul operates. But, something I want to mention about Paul's community is that because his standards are so well known, like I knew for sure that it was going to be safe for kids. And, that's really critical. It's a top value for me. For my friend's property, not knowing what I was going to get into, I also knew that there was a family living there already. And that family happened to have kids of similar ages to my kids. So I felt, like that was going to be safe for my kids as well. And so totally different experience. And I think, fortunately, in both communities, we got lucky in that there were a lot of, delightful people and a lot of good mentors. And it was, so that was also very friendly to kids. But of course, totally different, standards and models. So anyway, I only mentioned it to Paul because I am curious to see, how my friend, who is just delightful and caring and loving and, met a partner that is even more delightful, how they're going to navigate, kind of like the first trauma. And it's just so normal with humans. You have to anticipate that will happen. And so how will they traverse it and then not be traumatized after, to still be delightful after, I
think a lot of this is much like the, permies online, permies.com online. And so, so you're new to the staff at Permies, And what you see now is like, oh, there's some stuff that's getting sorted out. There's some people that show up and they say this or they say that, and what are we going to do and stuff. And as Raven points out, wow, when Raven showed up, it was 20 times worse than what it is now, and it's about setting a precedent. And then, but before Raven, it was 20 times worse than that. And it's like when we were getting started, it's like the number of people who were hostile and basically saying, so pretty much the kinds of things that you're concerned that your friends are going to eventually encounter, and like, how are they going to get through it? And it's kind of like, we've been through it 1,000 times on permies now, and we get rather calloused. And I kind of feel like it would be good to bring the permies.com staff together for one of those kind of like podcasty things we're doing on YouTube these days. We're kind of getting started at doing that. And so, but I think it would be good to kind of talk about that kind of community, because I do think that how you manage the community online, a lot of those lessons do carry over to in-person community. And for what I'm doing here, I think what we're doing here is quite unique. And what I'm hoping is that we'll do this experimentation with human beings. We'll all put on our lab coats, and those who aren't wearing lab coats are the guinea pigs. And then do this experimentation with community. And it's like, will this recipe work? Is this recipe something that can be duplicated? Is it a good recipe? Is it a stupid recipe? But we gotta try it. And I think that once we've tried it and proven that it works, which I think it will, I think it'll be more successful than the current models that are out there. It'll be more successful than the model your friend is trying, I believe. And then, but once we get it done, then there can be more like it, and then it can, because a lot of it is like, why aren't there more people in the boot camp? Why aren't there more people doing the skip? And it's kind of like, and you pointed it out a few days ago. It's like, well, people go to school at a university because other people have gone to school at a university, and you kind of know how it's going to go. You kind of know how it's going to play out.
Well-traveled path.
It's a well-traveled path. Whereas, we're trying to do a prototype, and it's like, in order to do this prototype, we need volunteers to be part of the prototype, and we're struggling to get those volunteers. We need to get to a critical mass of people, a number of people here, and we're struggling to get there. But, okay.
Hi, this is Mark. Sometimes talking to a friend or family member about permaculture can be met with a blank stare if it's all new to them. A great way to explain some of it can be over a card game using permaculture playing cards, which each have interesting facts with quality illustrations and descriptions. A wide range of people, places, and things, all related to permaculture, can be found on the permaculture playing cards at richsoil.com/cards.
I want to address a thing that, for the online stuff, for the challenges, there is a thing I've got a note here in my list of things to talk about.
Wait.
Wait.
Before you move on, a few things came to mind, which was, I remember the first time I was here, I got to talking with Magdalene, and I was curious and poking around, like, what's it like here behind the scenes, in community? It looks so great from the outside. And, she mentioned, it's just, it's not anything that special. Like, humans are still humans. Conflicts still arise. But she said, and every time it's always been handled very respectfully. And so it's not that there are superhumans living here. There are still human things that happen. But it takes, a whole lot of wisdom, I think, to handle something in a good way, to get, favorable outcomes, and still be in alignment with your values. So that was something that, you have something to say about that.
I think an interesting thing about Magdalene is that she'd been here maybe a month when there was a couple here that arrived, and then they were breaking up, and the couple both of them were behaving really poorly to everybody else. And some of the people were kind of like, oh, this is kind of a gross mess that I don't want to be around, and so thinned the herd a bit. Like some of the other boots left because it's like, who wants to be around a couple breaking up, and they're just so rah. So Magdalene was a champion. It's like, I've seen people break up before. And so, this is going to happen. And this person's behaving very poorly. Yeah, that's kind of par for the course. And then she focused on the stuff that she was here to learn about and do and be part of, while other people, the couple in question were just like, nah! And then the other people around them were kind of like, I'm out of here. This is more drama than I want to be around. And then, of course, eventually the couple left, and then the drama's gone. But by then, they've kind of left behind a little bit of a ghost town in the boot camp department. But Magdalene was still here. So you say you're asking Magdalene, and I'm kind of thinking like, that's the right person and the wrong person to ask, because Magdalene, I don't know what it is about her, but she is able to endure drama. And so, which I think is something that is a component of community, that it's like, and the way that she did it was with grace, and it's like somebody's behaving poorly and she's like, and then she just goes about her day and kind of, ignores it, might be a way of putting it, like somehow be able to have a life that is passive despite this couple over here behaving quite poorly. Now, I wasn't even told about it. I didn't even know what was going on until it was too late, until like one of the people had already left. And then this one guy was supposed to be leading a project, and he kind of like lost his shit and took off in the middle of it, and Magdalene just stepped in and carried it on. And she's like, this project's only, I've only been here a month, but I kind of know what the project's supposed to be, so let me just step in here, and I don't really have a lot of experience with this, but we'll figure it out. So she just kind of, and so when I found out later that she had done that, and then that particular thing that the boots were working on that day got done, and Magdalene was the one that kind of led them, even though she didn't know then, we made up this brand new role here called Sub-Commander, which I think is funny, a funny name. But, so she was the first ever Sub-Commander, and then, I was glad to so then I believe that Des was the High Commander at the time. And then a lot of times there's a project over here, and it's like Magdalene's going to run point on that. And there was one guy who showed up eventually, and he could not allow a woman to tell him what to do, and he left.
All right. These stories have side-railed a bit.
The thing is that you ask somebody, what is it like, and you ask the person, and she said, what? She said, it's just like, people doing people things. And, but I think for the most part, it's like easier to be in the boot camp than it is to be in any worky job. Because it's kind of a shitty school, but it's kind of an easy-paced shitty school.
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak to being in the shitty school. I haven't spent time in it, but that was my memory of Magdalene, and I really liked Magdalene. I thought she was a cool kind of person. So she kind of gave a little bit of flavor, or just color to what her experience was like, and I was like, that seems about right. It's humans do human things. You touch on another thing, and I wanted to speak to it, which was staff. Yeah, bridging the gap to behind the curtains at permies.com. I have to say, initially when I was reading up on the training material, I was like, wow, this is really insightful, and and useful, like just useful information that I can apply to other things. And so, I loved getting in on the training material. And then once I saw behind the curtain and how much effort is made, I think initially it was kind of overwhelming of, to see the amount of shittiness behind the curtain that you guys deal with and take care of so that everyone can have a lovely experience. And so, it gives me a whole new perspective on how much work you do to make permies so lovely and welcoming to people who otherwise would, wouldn't touch the nastiness that other people leave behind with a 10-foot pole, right?
You get kind of used to human beings and how they do their human thing, and how to navigate that. And when you're brand new at being a moderator on permies, and we're kind of used to this, you're brand new, you're going to be overly kind, and you're going to get a little attached, and you're going to find a person that's behaving poorly, and you're going to try to nurture them. That person will burn you 100 times, and then you'll be jaded like the rest of us.
Yeah, and I'm definitely still on the new side for sure, and feeling that, and maybe being overly optimistic on the human condition. And yet, what I think about is, how do you go through this and somehow not be calloused, to somehow still have, love and generosity and empathy? Is it possible? Is it possible to make it to the other end where you're not a new person and still feel, optimistic and lovely about humans?
I think that there are a lot of people that are on permies that are not on staff, and they live that life all day, every day. And they enjoy permies a lot. And then when we invite them to be on staff, they decline. Those people have the life that you've described. But and that's the next point in my thing, is to talk about
so bringing it back to my friend and his farm and his community, I'm so curious to see if he can remain loving and generous and delightful in years to come. And so I'm hopeful for him. I hope.
Oh, I am too.
Yeah.
And yet I have.
Yeah, you know.
I just know about. I know about the dark side of hundreds of communities, and how they went to shit. And so, we need a better recipe for community, because the benefits are phenomenal, and it solves all kinds of things, including just general well-being of individuals. The thing that you're talking about, how do you have this beauty? How do you have this desire and ability for art and beauty, and have it not be tarnished by the darkness of how ugly people can be, humans can be?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's make a space for that. And so this is the experiment that I'm attempting to do, and I need human beings to help me see it through. I wish for people listening to this podcast to come out here, either as to rent a cabin for a month. So you're here for 5 weeks, is that right?
Yeah.
And so, I think it'd be delightful to get 100 people a year kind of doing what you're doing. Come out here for a month. We've had people come out for 2 or 3 months at a time as seppers. And then, of course, people in the boot camp. Really need people that are going to be permanent residents to come to the boot camp.
So, on one side, I see my friend unintentionally building community way sooner and really not even putting that much effort into it, right?
Ah.
And, it's all come. And there are friction points,
Sure.
for sure. And then, here, you're hoping to, you are putting a concerted effort to building community, and it's just not coming easily, right? And so I look at the two different models and I make speculations. And I feel like maybe one significant difference is that, the way you publicize yourself out into the ether is that you're all tyrannical, and it might not work for you, and so it seems like the barrier to entry is really high, and you do that intentionally so that you detract or deter the types of people who probably won't thrive here, but it also seems like maybe it's too intimidating for the people who would do well here, because it's like, am I good enough? Will I make it there? Will I thrive? I don't know what the tyranny of Paul will really be like. And even I've listened to so many of your podcasts, and I still felt that hesitation coming in, even though I've been here multiple times, and I enjoy your company, and yet I still felt that intense hesitation. And so what I would like to offer to all of you podcast listeners,
I call them pod people.
Right. The pod people, the respectable pod people, is that Paul isn't that tyrannical, and he does offer a safe space, and he is caring and loving and kind and generous, so generous. And so, my suggestion to you was to maybe wear that a little more on your sleeve.
The problem with that whole path is that we get people who show up and they believe that, like, oh, Paul is not tyrannical, Paul is, generous, and they show up and they're like, okay, give me the generosity, and because you're not tyrannical, because you're benevolent, you need to be obedient to my whim. I'm not going to be in the boot camp, and you're going to feed me and give me a warm bunk, and in fact I want that cabin all to myself forever now, for free. And
get it, and it's effective, but maybe it's also deterring the types of people that you want here too. I
know, and at the same time, as much as it deters the type of people that I want here, I guess, and this kind of leads to an item that I got down on a couple of it's on my list to talk about. But you're right, and I don't have any other way of doing this. When I first arrived at this property, I thought that we would get, and I always called this person a Betty. There would probably be somebody who's retired or near retirement, who's tired of the rat race, and they would live here and nurture the people who come and basically protect those people from me. And which is the role that, in a way, kind of sort of a little bit, that Jocelyn did when she was here. And Jocelyn hasn't been here for 5 years now. And it's like, so I think made everything here probably 100 times more delightful. And then if anybody started to drift into a space that doesn't really fit, then they got to come into my office.
I don't know, Paul. I think you've got enough Betty in you.
Oh, my. I don't think so. I do not cook. Jocelyn was a great cook.
Sure.
And I think food is like the place where you really bring people together and you really make it magic. But I don't know. Everybody keeps bringing their kids and putting them in front of me, and like my kid is behaving, and it's like I'm just mean to him is all I am.
I think you bring so much merry and delight to a space, and I think you sell yourself short.
And maybe I sell myself short. Maybe I don't, but maybe I sell myself short because it's like I have been burned thousands of times, and what I'm trying to do is protect myself, and I'm trying to protect my community. Really, I'm trying to protect the people that are here from anybody that's yucky, and or whatever yuckiness that they might bring. And so how do you end up with a beautiful community with beautiful people that are going to not, be leeches? and we sometimes, the leeches that show up get sick of being here and they leave, and whereas I think your friend might someday be overwhelmed by leeches, like all the productive people will have left, and the leeches remain. I'm concerned for your friend, and I've never met your friend. I don't really know the story. And it's like, I've just seen it so many times. But I kind of feel like the things that I say are, in a way, bait for those productive people that are like, I have no problem taking raw land and building a wafadi on it and beautiful gardens or people who want to join the boot camp. It's called the boot camp, and people that are like, and I kind of feel like Magdalene. We were just talking about Magdalene. What a great example! The first couple of weeks, she worked very lightly because it took her a while to get her wind, and we were totally cool with that. We encourage people to take lots of 10, 20 breaks a day. And then she got her wind, and then when she did the stuff that the boot camp does, then she did it at her I don't know, I want to use the word petite pace. It wasn't like Captain Industry or Grunty Man. It was, can you imagine Magdalene being Grunty Man? She's, a petite gal. And so...
So you were very understanding to her. And I think you're very kind and understanding of people. And yet there does seem to be a line drawn, or there is a line. There is a distinction between someone who is genuinely doing their best and someone who is a leech. And if you know that you are on the decent side of that line, and you feel still somehow intimidated in being here, reconsider. I think that's all I want to say about that.
I appreciate your kindness in saying that. I do wish that we had several Bettys here. Some people that would be here that love to nurture community, to be more of a nurture force than I am. I feel like I'm not very much of a nurture force, and I think a lot of that has to do with the cooking thing, my shortcomings as a cook, and other shortcomings which I think a Betty will do 100 times better than I ever will. But when right now, when somebody starts to get a bit of a cold, then I'll come out with the fire cider and and say, here's a ginger drink you can have, and stuff like that. But as much as I might do that to some degree, but not as much as a Betty would. I'm kind of an ignorant fool in a lot of that stuff. And
yet you do your best, and that's kind and nurturing in its own way. But sure, I will agree. You aren't, I don't know, a kitchen Betty. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? That's not. You play more dominantly in other roles, but anyway, I think I've said my piece there.
Okay.
Come on out.
All right. I'm sorry I'm discouraging people. I don't want to discourage people, but at the same time, I think I need to draw some lines, but I think that the lines that I draw are appealing to the more industrious folks. The people that want to get stoned and play video games all day are going to find my message to be unappealing. Although we've had quite a few people where their whole thing in life was to get stoned and play video games all day, and they got sick of it, and then they joined the boot camp, and then after several months in the boot camp, they kind of broke that habit, and then they went back to their lives elsewhere. So we were I don't know, a rehab center of sorts. But I would prefer to find people that are going to, end up being permanent residents here. But the only way to try that out is to, say, okay, join the boot camp for a week, or come out here and rent a cabin for a week or a month or 2 months or something. We've had some really amazing people come out where they would rent a cabin for a couple of months. I really want to emphasize more of that, as well as, join the boot camp. I do want to mention real quick a thing where, when it comes to online communities and the ways that we manage permies and how it relates to physical communities, there was an online community when I first went up on Mount Spokane that was run by the Spokane newspaper at the time. And when I saw it, you could see the discussions of the past, where there were thousands of different people who tried to be involved in the conversations and talk about things. But it was, they were open. They were very, very open, and they, didn't want to delete anybody's, they didn't want to censor anybody's comments. And so what ended up happening, by the time I got there were only 3 people there who were all extremely hostile to everybody. And everybody else had left. And so I kind of feel like a big part of what we do at Permies is we try to remove the hostility, and so the hostile people are driven off, and the lovely people have a place.
A safe space.
Yeah. And so I think that's what I'm doing here, is basically a very similar thing to what we're doing at permies.com, trying to provide a safe space for the gentle souls. And granted, some hostile people might argue with me about my definition of gentle souls, and that's fine. So it's my idea of gentle souls. But I do like the idea that some people will eventually get tired of their worky job and possibly retire early to come live here in some flavor, one thing or another. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what it might be that they'll do when they're living here, like how that relationship is. But we have so many different programs, and we blah 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 blah. All right, real quick. They eventually shut down that forum in Spokane. It became these 3 extremely hostile people just talking to themselves. Whenever a new person showed up, they would scream at them until the new people would leave. And so I firmly believe, and this was before I even created permies.com. And so now, wow, Permies is about to turn 20 years old. And which is, I don't know, that's another giant cool thing. But and the fact that it's so massive and has become so popular, I think shows that some of the stuff that we're doing is working, despite some people saying that it's stupid and bad and awful. I think we're proving it is effective. So, all right. I'm moving on from community stuff. I want to point out that we've been having a lot of server crashes lately. It could be related to the number of people that are coming, but I think it is not. We're trying to get it all sorted out. But I spent a bunch of this morning trying to deal with server crash stuff. And we started this podcast when I had half an hour of the servers look like they're going to be okay. And too much of my days kind of goes into like that kind of stuff. But the other weird thing that I want to talk about as my last parting note is that here we are in Montana. It's January, and we have yet to get colder than 19 degrees here this winter, which has been really weird. And we haven't had very much snow. We did get about, 5 or 6 days ago, we got about 3.5 inches of snow, which is kind of an edge case about whether we should plow it or not. And so you wanted to get the BB for plowing snow, so you went ahead and plowed it. I'm still on the fence about whether we needed to do that or not, but okay, you did it, so it's done. And you got the BB. Way to go. Yay. By the way, we need to get that chain put back on that tire before you go. And that's all I got. What do you got anything else for this podcast?
Do I have anything else?
You got a list. You're not checking your list off as you go. I usually check off my list as I go. Okay.
I would say if you happen to be on YouTube and see some cat house videos,
please give it a thumbs up.
Sure.
Leave a kind comment, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just I did my best. It wasn't that great.
All right.
Man, highly reviewed. No, I'm just kidding.
I believe, and I think I've mentioned.
Try not to count how many times I
Okay.
That's it.
There's ways to edit out the ums. So sometimes Andreas and I will be working with something, and then there'll be too many ums, and we can show something else while we play the audio with all the ums edited out, so it doesn't look weird. All right. If you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about community, homesteading, and permaculture all the time.
In a world on the brink of social collapse, one website stands above the rest to fight back the zombie horde of corporate trolls. Permies.com. Take back control of your destiny and protect your loved ones from the toxic gick coming at you from all directions. Strap on your overalls and start building that bunker of abundance with the good vibes and friendly, helpful insight found at Permies.com.